Thank you very much for waiting. Now we'd like to start the session once again. From here, we'd like to offer a session, Impending EU Cyber Regulation, How Should Business Respond? We'd like to start the panel discussion. So let me introduce the member of the panel, Head of the Industrial Security Competence Center, VDMA, Mr. Steffen Schmilman, CISO and Managing Partner, Cyber Chain Alliance, Mr. Marc Avery.
Good evening.
And the moderator will be reporter, City News and Investigative Report Unit from Nikkei, Mr. Atsushi Teraoka. So please, I would like to pass my microphone over to Mr. Teraoka.
Okay, so in this session, we want to discuss about cybersecurity regulations by EU governments. As also mentioned in the previous session, some laws related to cybersecurity are being enacted to make corporate cybersecurity mandatory. So I think EU is at the forefront of these issues. EU is requesting companies, including Japanese ones, really wide range of security measures by Cyber Resilience Act or CRA for IoT device manufacturers, and Network and Information System Directive or NIS2 for infrastructures. These two laws are so complicated, but we'd like to go to quick introduction in this session with 25 minutes. And hope this discussion will be some hint for Japanese companies to start responding to these restrictions. So, and we have two experts with deep knowledge and insights with this theme. Could you give us a short self-introduction? So please, Steffen, from Germany.
Thank you. I'm Steffen Zimmermann from VDMA. VDMA is the European Industry Association of Machinery Manufacturers, Industrial Automation and Related Manufacturing Software. It's located in Frankfurt in Germany. I'm since 24 years now at VDMA and serve as a head of industrial security, and I'm responsible for a wide range of topics. I'm in charge for cybersecurity regulation and governmental affairs, including also the aforementioned Cyber Resilience Act, the Radio Equipment Directive, and the NIS2 Directive. Approximately more than 90% of our 3,600 members are affected by the European cybersecurity regulations. And I'm also expert in national and international standardization committees, including those for the CRA, standardization at CEN, and the working group for getting the IEC 62443 fit for the Cyber Resilience Act located at CENELEC.
Thank you, Steffen. So, Marc Avery from UK. Please, Marc.
Thank you. It's great to be here. So my name is Marc Avery. I am the managing partner at a company called Cyber Chain Alliance. We are a cybersecurity advisory firm, and we help our clients, our global clients, to navigate the requirements from a risk perspective in order to combat cybersecurity threats, but also from a compliance perspective as well. My background stretches over 25 years in the information security industry. I've managed large transformation programs both here in the UK within central government and also out in the Middle East. And I am the former Chief Information Security Officer of the Smart Metering program here in the UK, one of Europe's largest IoT networks.
Okay, thank you very much. So at first, we'd like to run the outline of CRA and NIS2. So Steffen, could you explain the major requirements of those two regulations to companies? And what do you think the influence of CRA and NIS2 on EU business?
Thank you, Atsushi. These two new all new European regulations cover, I think, three aspects. First is cybersecurity for products itself, also the cybersecurity for software and services, and the cybersecurity at the local production sites in Europe. The NIS2 directive, for example, is addressing facilities located in the European Union and also providers of digital services to European customers. So this could be located outside of Europe with more than 50 employees or a revenue higher than 10 million euros. Companies in scope of the regulation have to register to their national cybersecurity authorities, like the BSI in Germany or ANSSI in France, and they shall report significant incidents within 24 hours, and they have to implement a risk-based cybersecurity measures. Because the directive needs to be transposed into national laws in Europe, it is unclear how many companies will finally be in scope. For Germany, we estimate around 30,000 companies to be in scope only for the NIS2 directive. Alone for machinery in Germany, we estimate more than 3,600 manufacturers to be directly affected. That is roughly about 50% of all manufacturers in Germany within machinery. From these 3,600 manufacturers, 75% of these affected manufacturers are small or medium business with less than 250 employees. So this is quite hard to achieve for them. Additionally, the Cyber Resilience Act will come into force on December the 10th, and that means in 14 days, and this will heavily affect every intelligent product on the European market. The regulation requires manufacturers of products with digital elements, including software, to comply with so-called essential cybersecurity requirements, covering security by design, security by default, and vulnerability management within a given support period for the product itself. There will be a transition period of 36 months starting on December 10th, which means that the requirements need to be fully applied when the product is brought on the European market after 11th of December in 2027. So manufacturers will have approximately 3 years from now on to alter the products to fulfill the essential requirements of the CRA. Now, this is not an easy task. For example, a packaging machinery will have to fulfill these requirements in 3 years. But we all know that design and construction of a machine is not taking place in 2027. It is taking place now. So if you are a manufacturer, you should be worried. Do you want to sell your product in 2028? Can you integrate the requirements into all of the products that you want to sell in the future in Europe? So no security, no selling in Europe. You should also be worried about your supply chain. Do the components you integrate fully fulfill these requirements? What about some open source software code in your product? It will be very difficult for manufacturers to get answers in your supply chain. Finally, we also see the problem of missing standards in this area. Yes, we do have the ISO 27001 for the NIS2 directive that is roughly covering 90% to fulfill the NIS2 directive. But we also have the IEC 62443 and the ETSI cybersecurity standard for consumer IoT. But do they cover all essential cybersecurity requirements? I don't think so. They have to get adopted for the Cyber Resilience Act. The CRA has a list of 26 products categories with higher concerns, including smart meters, firewalls, operating systems, or smart locks. We actually don't have the necessary harmonized standards for any of those 26 products yet. We even don't have any clear definition of those 26 product categories at all. The definitions will come in 1 year from now from the Commission. The harmonized standards will not be available before 2026. Both regulations will heavily change the landscape in Europe. Don't wait to start. I think start yesterday.
Thank you, Stefan. So I think it is very hard to explain these two complicated laws in this short time, but I hope most listeners can understand these two laws are requesting very complicated, integrated, and organizational countermeasures for cybersecurity. So we can't rely those measures on cybersecurity team only. We can move as an organization, as a team in the corporation, as for corporation security. So, and then Marc, could you explain the background of these two laws? Why EU governments needs to establish these two regulations?
So one of the important things to remember is that devices are no longer just devices. They are part of an ecosystem. And when you combine that with services and people, the devices themselves are part of the vulnerability within that ecosystem. And attackers will seek to exploit any vulnerability, whether that's within a device, whether it's in a human being, or whether it's in a process. We talk a lot about people, process, and technology. So the purpose of the regulation and regulation in general, to some extent, has a desire and a desired outcome to improve the resilience of the ecosystem, the cybersecurity resilience, and fundamentally the operational resilience. We have seen so many third-party supply chain attacks in recent years. It is not always the target company that attackers will go to seek and exploit first. It will be elements of the supply chain. So my summary of the requirements between the two different acts is that the Cyber Resilience Act is there to govern the device security. So that is everything which has a digital element which is in operation within the EU. So that covers hardware and software. And the obligations on manufacturers, I would suggest that the obligation should be fairly familiar to manufacturers. We're talking about designing cybersecurity into the product at the design stage. This isn't just about manufacturing. This is understanding the threats to the devices themselves and the environments and the supply chains within which they operate. And in the example of the smart metering program here in the UK, way back in 2012, we were designing the system to combat the threats. So we had plenty of discussion and design activity conducted to think about and be thoughtful of the threats that attackers might exploit in order to gain access to sensitive data or to impact the electricity and gas networks here in the UK. So because of that threat modeling, as we called it, the design of the system was robust enough, and various measures of trust were either included or excluded depending upon their requirements. So the design of these systems is not in isolation anymore. We have to think about the supply chain and the context of which the devices will live in. And it's also important to consider the life cycle of those devices. So as many manufacturers will be aware, that there's an obligation now to ensure that those devices throughout their life cycle are maintained appropriately, be that with firmware or software updates. And the EU will go slightly further than what we have here in the UK currently. So just to refresh the readers, the UK is no longer part of the EU. So the UK introduced the Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act back in 2022, but it did not go as far as the EU Cyber Resilience Act, which does require conformity assessments. So all manufacturers will have to declare conformity to the security standards that are required. And just to briefly summarize the NIS2 directive, that is essentially more about the context and the environment and the processes within which the devices sit. So if you are a service provider within the EU, the NIS2 Act is more appropriate and brings into play the incident reporting. Risk management is going to be something that manufacturers, if they're not already, need to pay attention to now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So let's go to the most important part of this discussion. How should companies respond to these two restrictions, regulations? Could you explain the major? Could you explain any good examples about UK companies? How are they responding to those regulations? Steffen, so you are first, please.
So thank you. I can explain something about UK companies, but I can talk about our German members. First, don't reinvent the wheel. So a lot of companies are just doing cybersecurity from the beginning and integrated in the products. We have also cybersecurity requirements on a national level for critical infrastructures. So the providers of services within critical infrastructures do already have those supply chain security requirements. So at least on a distinct level, there are existing cybersecurity measures. Most of the problem is you do not really document what you do beside the fact that you are certified, but most of the manufacturing companies are not certified against cybersecurity. To make it short, to comply with NIS2, for example, the ISO 27000 is a fine approach, but not for all businesses. For especially small businesses, it's better to prepare some gap analysis. What is that what you have already done and what is missing to fulfill the NIS2 requirements? Of course, the problem is that it is a directive. Every directive needs to be transposed into national laws. The law is still missing in most of the countries. I think in just 5 countries in Europe, by far, the national transposition is done. Not in Germany, not in France, not in the big ones beside Italy. And it's about just doing this gap analysis on what to expect from the NIS2 directive itself, and doing, for example, pen tests to find the gaps. You go into your basement and look where are the rats. And you try to find them and to get a way forward how to deal with it. For that, we do a lot of things with companies within our machinery sector. We provide them with guidance on the NIS2 directive. We also have some more or less national or European-based certification framework. It's called TISAX. TISAX is more famous in the automotive sector for automotive suppliers. And we did a research on that and said, if you are TISAX certified because your automotive OEM requires you to do so, then you appropriately fulfill the NIS2 requirements easily. And for the CRA, it's about the standards. We already said that. If you want to go into the right direction, you try to find the right standards. And this is not easy because the standards itself are not yet harmonized. So they give no presumption of conformity when you sell your product on the European market. At least the CRA is not still here. So we have a couple of weeks and a month to get these standards into the right direction. And this is what we're already doing. So companies like ABB, Siemens, Bosch, and others are sitting together on CEN-ELEC level and focusing on getting the IEC 62443 ready to fit for the purpose. That means that also the IEC version, so the international version of this standard, will look different from the European one. That will lead to some obstacles on how to work with the standard in the future, because we will not see that all of these European regulation will come into the international standard. I think that this is still not possible, but we have to integrate all these essential requirements from the CAA, and also we also have to integrate some assessment criteria. How can we find out if the product fulfills the requirements from the CAA? So the IEC and all the other standards are still missing this. Additionally, there's a couple of experts working on a specific CRA working group at CEN-ELEC. In this working group called Working Group 9 in CEN-ELEC JTC 13, there are actually more than 250 experts at the moment working on the standards. And I think more standards do not lead to better work. It leads to longer work. And so I say, don't wait for finalized standards. They will be not here until 2026. Just use the 62443 to get into the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
That's what we are doing.
Thank you, Stefan. So we only have a few minutes left. I'm sorry, but Marc, do you have any? Could you share your opinion about this theme?
Yeah, sure. So regulation is a constant evolution. Okay, it does not stop. I remember the British standard 7799, ISO 27001, the NIS directive, NIS 2. In financial services, we have the Digital and Operational Resilience Act to contend with as well. So regulation is a good thing in some ways. I appreciate that this is a cost impact to manufacturers and operators of essential services, but the attackers do not care about this regulation. The attackers are not waiting until 2026 and 2027 to test the security of your devices. They're testing it today. So put regulation aside, be sensible, and ask yourselves the question, what could possibly go wrong in our devices? And work from there. That is your risk assessment. You will then come up with some sensible controls which will align with the regulation at some point. Yes, you need to have some focus on the regulation because you need to comply and break into European markets. But actually, it doesn't have to start there. Equally, from a budgetary perspective, for many years, I've said that cybersecurity is a cost to doing business. Every founder, every tech startup, every manufacturer has to consider that cybersecurity is now a core part of what we do. It is not something that you can bolt on at the end of the manufacturing process.
Thank you very much, Mark. So we have to close this discussion. So 25 minutes is too short for this difficult theme, but I hope this will be some trigger for Japanese companies to start discussion over these regulations. I think so. As Mark said, as Steffen said, CRA will be completely free enacted in 3 years. So we still have 3 years, but if we don't move now, 3 years later, the products now developed won't be sold in the EU market. So there's so many risks on that. So please take care about these two regulations. So we don't have audience here, but I hope many listeners please give these two wonderful experts give a clap in front of your PC or smartphone. Thank you very much.